More juicy information on Ghost Bear Fleshstorm, the new Mechwarrior 5 Clans DLC. Sarna.net's Sean did an interview with Chris Lowrey over at PGI, over email, and they got a couple of nice answers to a lot of interesting questions. So let's go through the interview bit by bit and talk about that. And by the way, if you're interested in reading more information by Sean, I recommend that you guys check out the links in the video description, both this article right here, as well as a new Mechwarrior BattleTech information blast is going to be linked in the video description. Okay, so first question, why a DLC about Clan Ghost Bear? Chris Lowrey says, quite a few reasons, but from a narrative point of view, it comes down to where the bears are within the invasion timeline, as well as they will be introducing players to the Ghost Bears when they are at one of their lowest points in their history as a clan. So this is going to be us playing Ghost Bears at literally shit hitting the fan for that clan. Back at the turn of the millennium, Ghost Bears were the top dogs and the strongest of the Crusader clans, which led them to be the first clan to call for an invasion of the Inner Sphere. But in the years since the Dragoon Compromise, their fortunes changed, and the early stages of Operation Revival, which of course we were in as we were playing through the campaign of Mechwarrior 5 Clans, had been nothing short of disastrous for them. A series of unfortunate bits saw them lose the opportunity to take key worlds like Santander and Rasselhag. Yeah, they really Rasselhag, those were big fights and huge problems for the clans. Also, there were insurgencies on worlds like Thule that saw them needing to divert personnel away from the front lines, and the massive bungling of their logistics change that saw them constantly struggling against their own strained supply lines. So basically, while other clans are charging forward towards Terra as much as possible, the Ghost Bears have really been, well, on the slow burn. Kind of like their totem mech, or the totem Ghost Bear, a little bit hibernating because of issues that shouldn't happen with a modern army, especially like bad logistics chains. That is embarrassment. The final straw broke on the planet of Last Frontier, where the Green First Freemen fought Ghost Bear's elite First Bear Guards and the Silverroot Kashik, which is important because we're going to be part of the Silverroot Kashik, I think, and inflicted heavy casualties against what should have been a vastly superior bear force, including the eventual death of Sarkan Theresa del Villar. Her successor, Alitha Kabrinsky, used her first act as Sarkan to call for a no-confidence vote against Khan Karl Bourgeon, laying the blame for the Ghost Bear's poor performance squarely on his inept leadership. And that saw Bourgeon, of course, ousted as Khan, and Bjorn Jurgensen called up to replace him. And the clans then are recalled to the homeworlds after Leo Shower's death. Leo Shower's death, of course, is shown in Mechwarrior 5 Clans. That is when the fighter jet flies into the command center of that capital ship and destroys that. So, clans are recalled to the homeworlds to find a new Ilkhan. And the bears are now likely the only ones to appreciate the halt in hostilities, because now the bears will have time to wipe the slate clean, get their shit in order, and get the Ghost Bears back in the game. So the Ghost Bears are the clan that the players will find themselves introduced to when the campaign picks up. The clans have already returned to their homeworlds, so Bjorn and Alifa are going to look for ways to getting the Ghost Bears back on track and solidify their hold after their relatively new ascensions to the Khanship. And with the new elected Ilkhan Ulrich Kerensky presenting them with an opportunity that the Bears can't really pass on, Alifa enters Silverwood Kashik, and we are going to be, our star is going to be a part of that Silverwood Kashik, that elite unit. We're going to be deployed on a mission to secure the Bears the means to right their ship before the invasion of the Inner Sphere resumes. And we will take part in a story that sees the players strive to satisfy the lofty ambitions of the new Khans in securing what they believe to be the Ghost Bear's true legacy. Alright. So Sean saying, Mechwarrior 5 Clans gave us the fascinating perspective of Smoke Jaguar warriors during the clan invasion, struggling with their duty to their clan and the atrocities that the same clan committed. What would be different in the perspectives? And I've seen a lot of conflicting takes on that. I, for one, liked the agency on the player, that we could in the end decide, do we want to continue supporting this fucked up philosophy, or do we actually set ourselves free from it? And so I like that, but other players said, yeah, no, I would have preferred if it was just within the confines of the clans, like don't think any original thoughts and whatnot. And I cannot understand that, but I for one appreciated that we had the choice and 2 different endings because of that. And Chris is saying a lot will be different. The primary goal of Mechwarrior 5 Clans' story was to introduce the clans to a new generation of players. So a lot of the story decisions around the base game were driven by 2 major bullet points. A, introduce the clans, their society, and the story of the invasion in a coherent way. And B, support the ultimate design goal of giving the players an ending-altering choice going into the finale of the game, just like Mechwarrior 4 did. Mechwarrior 4, depending on your choices, of course, you could either set up your own merc base, take like a planet for yourselves, you could do the Steiner ending, or you could do the Devian ending, right? I think the Steiner ending was where you in the end had to fight like a trial against the clans to like basically become a clan Mechwarrior as you're going into exile with Katrina Steiner. And of course, if you fought on the side of the Deviants, or the Steiner Deviants to be precise, then you would oust the Steiners. I think the last fight was against Nondi Steiner and her mechs guarding Roccat. So yeah. And I enjoyed that. That was also a good point that gave Mechwarrior 4 a lot of replayability, and that's what gives Mechwarrior 5 Clans at least replayability once, and the campaign being 30 hours long, I think, or 20 hours, depending on how fast you go. That was nice. I would say, however, though, that I think they should have taken more time to introduce the clans and the society and the story of the invasion. I think that would have needed to cook a little bit longer. I think that for like somebody who's not familiar with BattleTech at all, they should have been a little bit more on the nose with introducing all this stuff. So that's that's like criticism on, of course, on a high level, but yeah, that I think they could have done more to get people into the like world of BattleTech, so to speak. Not only to establish stakes and establish the reasons for why revival happened in the first place and present the story of the clan invasion in a way that was easy enough to understand, but also introduce unique and complete factions that is very difficult to just jump right into for those who are not already familiar with the franchise. Yeah, exactly, that's the problem. Like, if you're not familiar with BattleTech at all, you have no idea what the clans are all about, right? As an example, as much as talking without contractions is seen as a very fundamental character trait of the clans, to many it sounds beyond strange. Not only does that make it difficult for the actors to perform, having to change their speech in patterns in a very unnatural way, but to those coming into the setting fresh, it can also come across as a lack of contractions was the result of a script written by an ESL speaker. An actual note that we had during production that had some calling us to just not bother with that particular tick given the headaches it caused. That is kind of funny though. So ESL, meaning English as a second language, so as if it was written by somebody like me, for example. But yeah, I wouldn't have had that issue. Or I would not have had that issue, I think. But it would sound definitely strange, and of course that is what the clans are going for, right? The lack of contractions as a part of an identifier. A tribal identifier, so to speak. So, this is why they have decided to head their principal cast in Mechwarrior 5 Clans to be a very young teenage Sipco to ease with the onboarding of those goals. And Liam was using contractions there to not only rebel as part of his character, but also to call attention to why the clans as a whole have those strange speech patterns in the first place, and why Naomi was there to be a window into the minds of veteran clan warriors instead of sticking with a full cast of naive Sipco graduates. And I think that the introduction of Naomi actually helped a lot, because then you didn't only have the point of view of those new mech warriors, you also had the point of view of a disgruntled mech warrior that is kind of fading out and slowly looking towards Solama units, which is the where mech warriors in the clans go when they're old and useless. They basically become frontline cannon fodder. Yes, I know. Clans are great, right? Sure, we wanted to tell a compelling story, but we also needed to tell a story that anyone could follow along with regardless of the exposure to the rest of the IP. So, Ghostbear Flashstorm will be very different in this regard. So, PGI thinks they have laid the groundwork for new players to understand the clans throughout the Smoke Jaguar campaign, and now they can dive right into a clan-based story from a perspective that will be very different from the base game, but very familiar to those who have read the novels, the viewpoint of veteran warriors at the top of their game. So, this is gonna be... What I'm reading here is that the DLC is gonna be very clan. So there will not be doubts or much disorder, and if there are differing opinions, they will be settled in a circle of equals by hitting each other on the nose. The Silver Kashyyyk isn't your typical front line trinaries. It's going to be a trinary star, and we're going to be a star commander. It is the honor guard of Clan Ghost Bears, Sakan Alita Kabrinsky. One of the most prestigious postings in the clan, and typically reserved for only the most decorated warriors who are fully devoted to the Ghost Bears and the Sakan's vision of their future. That will be reflected throughout the story and the campaign. So if you're looking for choices, I don't know if you're gonna get choices. I mean, there could be choices within the sense of the clans, but if it's gonna be like a kind of like question of conscience, you should call it, maybe like we had in the original campaign, I don't think this is gonna happen. If there's a choice in the campaign, it's gonna be A or B, but both are very clan. Next question from Sean. Mechwarrior 5 Clans sets the bar pretty high when it came to cinematics and voiceover work, and I agree, that was done very well. Will Ghost Bear Flashstorm continue to have the same high quality cinematics, or will the story content be more limited to briefings and in-mission dialogue? So, Chris says they have no plans on stopping with what Mechwarrior 5 Clans was known for, so they will heavily continue with their storytelling capabilities, and they have taken the time to further refine their tools and throw in new things that were technically challenging to do previously, such as the elemental characters interacting with mech warriors. Yeah, that was always their problem. That's also why we didn't get elementals in the first place for the base game, and I'm really happy that they were able to make it happen now. Finally, they always wanted to do infantry, but it just wasn't feasible. Never worked properly in Mechwarrior 5 Mercs. So now we get elementals. Maybe infantry could be the next step. Given that Flashstorm is a DLC, you should not expect, however, the same feature-length runtime that was fun in the base game. I mean, the base game had like, what, 1.5 to 2 hours worth of video sequences, right? So, right now they're tracking to have a total cinematic runtime much closer to that of a TV episode, but only for cinematics. So, 30-45 minutes of cinematics is still a lot, and there will be still more storytelling through gameplay as there was with the base game. Sean then asked, will Ghost Bear Flashstorm have the same character-focused story as the base game? Will we still have a star full of colorful characters? Will we have a megalomaniacal star kernel? Will there be loss, betrayal, and redemption? You know what? That figure was so somewhat relatable, but so hateable in the base game. I think they did a really good job with him. Chris says, yes, Flashstorm will introduce a whole new cast of characters to expand our character roster beyond the confines of the Smoke Jaguars, of course, because we're going to be in the clan Ghost Bear. And it will continue to expand on the greater story of the clan invasion from the Bear's perspective. Alita Kabrinsky is not going to be a megalomaniac. Those who know she can be a firebrand in the right circumstances. And Chris also says we don't necessarily want the story to be nothing more than a reskin of the base campaign. Yeah, that is good. The perspective this time around is going to be very different. You're playing as members of the most fanatically loyal units to the Ghost Bear cause, so don't expect anyone to become disillusioned with the Bear's missions. Yep. We're going to be a team of true believers who will give up anything and all for the clan. Sounds like you're playing StarCraft back in like the late 90s. Everything for the clan. But like before, there will still be conflicts and personal stakes in the story to immerse you in the boots-on-the-ground perspective in the BattleTech universe that Mechwarrior has always been. So, like I said, this is probably where we will see maybe a circle of equals, or maybe some trials to prove your points. Should be interesting. Would be cool to see that. It's just that this time around, things will focus a bit more on the macro story of Clan Ghost Bear itself, their current troubles after disasters showing in the early invasion, and the new Khan's mission to restore the clan to the glory it once enjoyed. And then, question, who is this dude? Can we click this? Apparently it's not Bjorn Sorgensen. So, the guy with the scars is Samuel Seng, one of the members of the player's star within the Silver Kashyyyk. So, this is what happens when your cockpit gets breached, assumedly. Although we probably will learn where he got his scars from, but yeah, this looks nasty. Pay no attention to the smoke Jaguar pin on him. We are still mid-development, so things like costuming are still being worked on. Okay, this was, of course, a week or so ago. Woman indeed is Sakan Alita Kabrinsky. That would be her. Interesting hairstyle. She's not the player's character, but she's going to be the leader of the Silverroot Kashyyyk, so she's going to be our boss. Will be acting not only as Sakan, but also as our direct commanding officer while working under the Silverroot. Alright. Sean asking, the Fire Moth only recently made its way to Mechwarrior Online after a decades-long hiatus from any Mechwarrior game. How will this little speed demon perform in Ghostbear Flashstorm? Will we see Sakan Alita Kabrinsky perform terrifying feats in her signature light mech? So, without reading any further, here's the thing. As the missions get harder and more tonnage is thrown your way, the value of light mechs diminishes and diminishes. Unless missions are designed in a certain way that force you to take light mechs and going up in against other opposition in a way that the light mech is going to be the only and best pick that you can do at this point, you will always opt for the heavier mech. That means more firepower and more armor, because otherwise you will not see the end of the mission most likely. So let's see what Chris says. It's tough to center a story around the Silverroot Kashyyyk and not give Alifa her favorite ride. As to its performance, by the way, the Alifa Hero Mech is in Mechwarrior Online right now. As to its performance, the Fire Moth has always fulfilled an ultra niche role in that setting that somewhat shoehorns the mech into a very specific niche. It's a unique niche, but not one that is as straightforward to learn as other mechs in the game. Even in tabletop, it takes a lot of time and effort to learn how to properly leverage the Fire Moth, as the play patterns you need to get the most out of them are far from new player friendly. And it's going to be the same here in the context of a Mechwarrior game. So, I was saying, we do try to give you the tools to where it can do some crazy things if you take the time to learn and leverage its unparalleled speed. They've seen videos of Mercs players soloing levels with the Pirate's Bane and pilots with max evasion skills. A Fire Moth will be similar, but even more extreme in that experience. Hell of a lot more payload and speed, but with little protection that leaves next to no margin of error. And margin of error also meaning if the AI rolls a hit, it hits you. Period. I feel that last part is going to be the thing that stops the average player from keeping the mech around in the roster for long term. But I'm curious to see what kind of crazy things those players who took the time to master the Pirate's Bane and Mercs can come up with. For the achievement hunters out there will be a pair of achievements tailored to the Fire Moth to give it a little bit to incentive to try out and learn its unique playstyle. So what I'm taking from this is that later missions, once again, you want to bring tonnage and firepower. I would be surprised, but super happy if there was a later mission that actually makes you play light mechs, like a scouting mission or whatnot, before the actual engagement. That would be super cool to see, but so far PGI has not ever forced us to go back into lighter mechs, so I don't think it's gonna happen here, but I still would love to see that. Yeah, utilize the proper mechs for the proper jobs. Alright, moving on. Sean asking, Ghostbear Flashstorm adds an interesting assortment of Omnimechs. Nightjar is from Clan Jade Falcon, Ebon Jag of course from the Smoke Jaguars, Huntsman from Clan Roccat. Will the Silverroot Kashyyyk engage in Trials of Possession against all three clans, or we just get these mechs in our inventory? And Chris is saying, I feel like answering this would be considered a story spoiler, so if you want to go into Flashstorm fresh, you should skip down to the next question. For everybody else doesn't mind some setup, yeah, so you will have to do some trials for some of these mechs, that is cool, because that's the clan way, right? You can have trials of possession for all sorts of things, for factories, for technology, for full planets, resources, right? Chris continues on saying, the Ghost Bears were famously the only invading clan who did not leverage what they learned fighting the Inner Sphere to create brand new mechs specifically designed to fight the great houses like the Wolves, Jade Falcons and Smoke Jaguars did. Just another specter of Karl's lack of foresight leading the Bears in the early days in the invasion where the story picks up. Bjorn and Alifa are not about to fall into the same trap that Khan Burjan did, so the early part of the Flashstorm campaign will center around the clan attempting to secure resources they see as vital to their logistical preparations leading into the Wave 5 of Operation Revival. Alright. Sean continues to ask, Ghostbear Flashstorm provides us with the first non-Omnimechs, Kodiak to see, Rifleman to see, and Hunchback to see. Will our fellow mech warriors shun us if we use these substandard mechs throughout the campaign? You might call them substandard, but, you know, for the enlightened among us, Omnimechs doesn't mean good mechs. No. Battlemechs with clan technology. That's where it's at. Chris says, no, we won't be shunned. In fact, due to the story mechanics of the Ghostbear campaign, it might be necessary to leverage the second line mechs. A big part of the failings of Clan Ghostbear in the early days of the invasion was the failed management of their logistics resources. Some of that was due to poor planning, but as mentioned before, Bjorn and Lefa have no plans to repeat Carl Bergen's mistakes. For that reason, they have ordered the rationing of all the supplies and personnel. Some of those things will play into the story of Flashstorm, but this also results in one major mechanical change to the way the mech markets work in Flashstorm compared to the base game. Unlike the Smoke Jagger campaign that gave you unlimited reign over the clan's vast stockpiles of mechs and equipment, because we could literally buy anything, we were never ever starved for money. For the Ghost Bears, mech availability in the markets will be more heavily restricted and require to leverage a much tighter budget of resources due to rationing on the orders of the Ghost Bear Khans. So, no running a 5-point Direwolf Star. That's okay, I'm gonna run 5 Kodiaks, I'm fine with that. In those circumstances, second line designs may become a necessity regardless of how the warriors might personally feel about the stigma of using such designs in the field. Backfitting the Smoke Jagger campaign to have them won't come with this nuance, but then again, this is one aspect that we are fine with the gamifying the lore for the sake of creating an enjoyable game. So, it's also saying, if we force ourselves to stick to 100% of the lore in this area, the players would never have an option to even pick their mech in the first place, as most warriors, that's what I said when we were doing the campaign, don't get a choice in the mech they're assigned. Aiden Pride was saddled with Timberwolf, and he didn't like that. Yep. Next question from Sean. While standard battlemechs won't have omnipods, it looks like they can still be customized and even swap out engines. Can you also remove or add Endosteel ferrofibers, and will you be able to swap engines in Omnimechs? Ender and Fur options, not initially. They wanted to include armor and structure swaps, but they ran out of engineer time to get it work in the back of the UI properly, so it's on the shortlist to be added in at a later time. So Ender and Furrow switches will be added at a later time. For now, it will be hard equipped onto the mechs, although the Furrow and Endo slots are still free floating. Omnimechs will not have the option to remove engines, because that's the fundamental difference between battlemechs versus Omnimechs, right? So they'll keep that as well. Omnimechs will be able to configure their omnipods, allowing them greater loadout variety and freedom. Battlemechs will be more restricted in what they can take as loadouts, but they will have access to equipment, aka engine changes, and you know, smaller engine, bigger weapons. That is the name of the game for me, at least. One thing to note is that, unlike Mechwarrior Online, weapon hardpoints can be restricted based on size, and we have a meta game layer in the game that will make repairing battlemechs a bit more cumbersome when compared to Omnimechs to better balance the scales between the two mech types. Sean asking, will the new battlemechs come in multiple variants? Will we get the Hunchback 2C2 with the heavy lasers and the Hunchback 2C3 with ATMs? Chris says, yes, battlemechs will have multiple variants, but no on the Hunchback 2C2 and 3, as both of these variants are far removed from the invasion timeline that the game takes place in. So they are looking to keep the mechs within the confines of the timeline of BattleTech. But we will provide, he says, the same Mechwarrior Online stand-in designs with the corresponding missile and energy hardpoints and appropriate invasion-era tech. Sean asks, will the mechs be available in the base game, or are they only available for the DLC? And Chris, and this is already said on the Flashstorm DLC page, all mechs that come with Flashstorm DLC will be available in the baseline campaign. The only caveat is that, like Mechwarrior 5 Mercs, the mechs will be introduced to the base game when it's appropriate to do so within the context of the timeline, so you don't start your first mission in a Kodiak and just murder everything left and right. Two of the mechs being added to this expansion are specifically late invasion era designs that were not around during the initial stages of the invasion, so while they play a role from the start of the DLC campaign, for the base campaign they will only become available when it's appropriate for them to appear in the timeline. Sean further asks, will Mechwarrior's technology and mechs have the same upgrade system as Mechwarrior 5 clans? If so, how will they be modified to support the new 12 mission campaign? And Chris says, the upgrade loop will be the same as the base campaign, the only thing that will change is the content you have access to. The Science Lab and the Ghostbear campaign will be the same, but because we are members of the lead unit and the campaign that starts later in the timeline, we will have a lot of stuff pre-unlocked for us in the research tree. Mechwarrior skills are where things will be different this time around. With a new cast of characters comes a new set of Mechwarrior skills to complement the new veteran cast. So we should expect characters to come with not only several skills already researched, but also a series of brand new sets of high value skills specific to the Ghost Bear campaign. So hopefully no more useless melee nodes and other crap that we had in Mechwarrior 5 Clans in the base campaign. That was the only point I would have criticized about the character development in terms of their in-game fighting skills. Like, some of these skill nodes were really good and important, and some of them were completely useless. So good to see that they're revamping this right here. It doesn't want to spoil too much right now, but the new pilot skill run the gamut between metagame boosting skills that can augment things like mech XP, gains permission, conditional skills that can provide offensive or defensive bonuses for mechs that position themselves in certain ways on the battlefield, and even one skill that scales with the amount of unique heavy weapon types equipped on a mech's loadout. Ah, yes! The Swiss Army knives will finally have a reason to exist. Sean asking, elementals are finally being added to Mechwarrior 5 Clans. How will commanding our point of elementals work? Will we be able to command both elementals and swap into an elemental to run around as infantry? Chris says, there's a misconception here. You will not be able to play as an elemental. You will be able to command as the elementals, but you will not be able to jump into the cockpit of an elemental. Sean asking, we've only got screenshots of the new boss, the Iron Talon, and it appears to be having a force field of some kind. This is giving me extreme Mech Assault vibes. What's the story of the Iron Talon? Chris says, it's funny, we've had those PPC discharge effects now for over 5 years with mercs, but nearly every time they're used, the proportional image, some people always want to jump right to the energy shielding. Yep. Energy shields and other magic sci-fi equipment without some semblance of scientific plausibility behind them is a hard no-go zone for the BattleTech IP outside of the high-propulse generators and the Kearney Fuchida drives. Even if it would mean more flexibility in how you can design some encounter types, we don't plan on changing that stance anytime soon, which I think is good. Stay within the confines of the world and keep it true. I think that's very important. As to what it is, it's a unique creation for this game, but one rooted in the pre-existing BattleTech canon, particularly the mobile structural rules from tactical operations and the Rattler anti-air defense platform created by the Starlink Defense Force, although this one does not trace its lineage back to the SLDF. This particular unit mobile structure is part of the targeted planet's defense network and stands in the way of achieving a key objective. As mentioned in the BattleTech's Tactical Operations Manual, mobile structures like this are typically unique to single systems that construct them, and the Iron Talon is no different. Sean asking, there's a confirmed mission to be on top of a warship, which seems like a nod to the iconic final mission in Ghost Bear Legacy. Ghost Bear's Legacy, of course, a quote-unquote DLC, an add-on expansion to, I think, Mechwarrior 2 or Mechwarrior 2 Mercenaries. How hard was it to come up with the narrative reason to be fighting a mechs on top of a spaceship? Was the level design particularly challenging for what is essentially a really long tube? Chris says, funny enough, coming up with a reason was the easiest part, as there are multiple times in the lore when it happens. We even mentioned one of those times in Mechwarrior 5 Clans and mere comments on how Lincoln Osis won the Smoke Jaguar Khan ship over Sarah Weaver by fighting her across the hull of the Sabercat, which for us made it a convenient story to name drop the Sabercat well before the times, the events of Turtle Bay and the massacre. Here's a screenshot of the Kodiak together with, that looks like potentially a fire moth, and what is that thing in the back right there? That's an Ebon Jag from the side. Kodiak is just such an iconic mech. If only it had more weapon hardpoints. As to the level design, I know that mission in particular has gone through several revisions, so I'm sure it was very challenging to execute on, but I wouldn't be the best person to comment on that, given that the outside the framework that would facilitate an encounter like that, minute-by-minute combat encounter isn't his wheelhouse. Okay, so you can't really speak to on how hard it was to do, because he was not the person doing it, but it went through a lot of iterations apparently. Now, that's an interesting point. Sean is asking about modding. Modding has been a huge reason for Mechwarrior 5's Mercenary success. Will Mechwarrior 5 Clans feature similar mod tools? What enhancements have been made to the mod tools since Mercenaries? When will mod support officially arrive in Clans? Early access to mod tools, says Chris, is coming in mid to late May. But he can't speak to any of the specifics beyond that, since he's not involved with that aspect of development. Here's my 2 cents. Mod tools for Mechwarrior 5 Clans ideally should have been released when Mechwarrior 5 Clans hit. because we've had the game out for 6 months now and basically no modding, which is kind of sad. So, because I think that would have helped the popularity of the game a little bit more as well. So, hopefully we're gonna see some cool mods come out, but I feel it's gonna be very late. Now then, Sean is asking about the Ghost Bear Flashstorm free update and updates to the Trials of War DLC. What can we expect in the upgrade? Are we getting a new BM Plus? Pretty please. So we will be getting free updates to the game. They've made an announcement as to the content will be pushed with the free update. More specifics will come closer to the 7th of May release. So no news about like new game plus yet. John is asking, is Ghost Bear Flashstorm setting the pace for future DLC? Will future DLC have one planetary campaign and add 8 mechs? Chris says, nope, every DLC is going to be different. Even for Mechwarrior 5 Mercs, the content that comes with the update is generally determined by the amount of feature work that goes into its production. For Ghost Bear Flashstorm, they focused on providing more of what was in the base game, new campaign for a new perspective that moves to the story of a clan invasion forward, more cinematic storytelling that players enjoyed from the base game, with the highly requested and features and content added this time around of a deeper mech roster, new BattleMech Leg Lab, and elementals. If the target were to change into something more ambitious that requires a more specific effort to be exerted elsewhere, like a hypothetical sandbox campaign, like a hypothetical sandbox campaign that everybody wants, then the amount of content released would have to be aligned against the amount of feature work needed to produce whatever the core feature work is. So if they have to make a sandbox, basically that means that, of course, on the other side, the story part, of course, would suffer or not be possible. But like always, the larger a support base is for a product, the more flexibility we have when it comes to delivering on it. So be sure to check out Flashstorm if more of Mechwarrior 5 Clans DLC is what you wish to see produced. It's very much like how the Legend of the Kestrel Lances expansions for Mercs remains the only expansion without a unique mech chassis added to the roster. So much time and effort went into expanding the campaign and storytelling tools and systems to make that specific expansion and linear campaign systems work. And Legend of the Kestrel Lancers, to this point, is also, in my opinion, the best DLC for Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries. Didn't mean that the mech production stopped, only that we were unable to deliver a new one with this particular DLC. Clans will be no different. That makes sense, so they have to allocate their resources, right? If they're doing a lot of new mechs, they can't do like more extensive story. They have to balance that stuff around. Okay. By all means, speak up and let us know what kind of content expansions you would most be interested in seeing being developed. Just know that time and resources are a very finite thing in the game production, so at the end of the day, there's only so much we can do with a single DLC expansion pack. Sean asking, the DLC looks to be a new and completely separate story from the base game. Will we revisit Jaden and the rest of Cobalt and Copper Star in the future DLC? Chris says this is unclear at this point. His initial pitch for the DLC was to have it center on a Cobalt Star side story during the Year of Peace and dig into some of the things we could only skim on the surface in the base game, like Yuchi's story, for example, and some of Naomi's development. But it's always a question of how much people want to see that people go back and continue the story of Cobalt Star versus expanding the scope of the storytelling and getting a different perspective on the events as they move the time forward. At the end of the day, it comes down to what keeps the story interesting. If given the choice between a small side story with Jaden and Co 5 years later in 3057, he personally doubts that it would have as much ingrained interest with the audience as a Wolf versus Jade Falcon refusal war focused story would do. I kinda agree. I would like to see the story of Jaden and Co continued, but I also like to see different clan perspectives. And different clan perspectives allow them to always just have a new setting, right? And come up with something new that is fresh and interesting to explore. And they have a lot of options right here, so. But he also says, who knows, it will be completely off base on that front, so by all means, people, if you have different opinions, let PGI know. Then Sean is asking about the layoffs early this year. According to publisher EG7, Mechwarrior 5 Clans didn't grow the core Mechwarrior audience. Sean's terribly sorry to hear that many talented individuals are no longer colleagues at PGI. Have the cuts to staff affected this DLC or any future DLC? Chris saying, yeah, it's been a time of transition, and of course he wants to take a moment to recognize the incredible talent and hard work of those who contributed to Mechwarrior 5 Clans and also Mechwarrior Online. The dedication helped shape the game into what it is today. As for the future, the current team size is in line of what they had for Mechwarrior 5 Mercs and its DLCs, so they are in a strong position, and I quote, strong position, to continue delivering exciting new content for their 3 Mechwarrior titles. They're in a position to continue delivering content, new content for all 3 games, he says. Mechwarrior Online, Mechwarrior 5 Mercs, Mechwarrior 5 Clans. I would love to see more content in Mercs. I would love to see more content in Clans. I would love to see more content in Mechwarrior Online. If they can deliver on all these fronts, good, right? Alright. And then Sean goes into a fun question asking if Chris could rewrite the clan invasion, what would he change? And Chris says he would change the Crusaders, electing Ulrich Kerensky as Ilkhan. And then he goes into a lengthy bit on why he thinks that. But if you're interested in that, I will let you read that last bit for yourselves, as I'm mostly concerned with the Mechwarrior 5 DLC. So, lots of good information bits in here, of course, as always. I am cautiously optimistic for the DLC. Again, it is no secret, I think Mechwarrior 5 Clans, in my opinion, is the best Mechwarrior title ever released in terms of story, presentation, and everything coming together. Not perfect yet, but still strong showing, and I'm hoping that we can get more of that with the Ghostbear Flashstorm DLC, launching, I believe, May 7th. So, once we get our hands on that, of course, we will enjoy that. What is your key takeaway from this interview? Let me know in the comments below, and like I said, make sure to check out the interview yourself if you want to reread that part or read what Chris had to say on the story changes, if you could make them for the BattleTech lore, and also check out the other article by Sean. And once again, thanks Sean for letting me read through and comment on your article. Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Take care. Thank you so much, supporters. Couldn't do it without you. If you want to join Team TTB, check out the join button right here on YouTube, super thanks button in the comment section, or of course the links to Patreon or the merch store listed in the video description.